Angela, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Happy to do it.
So, I love photography. Photography has been one of those things in my life, of all the things that I've loved. That's definitely high up on the list. So, I'm excited to talk about the world of photography. But before we get there, I want to know 5 years ago, this pandemic was hitting us hard. We were all getting thrown into it. Ultimately, how did you make it through that time period? And how has it affected the way that you live life today?
Oh, goodness. So, creatively, I ended up doing a lot of small photo shoots at home. I experimented with tabletop photography and still life. I took a lot of pictures of my cats, but tried to find those little projects to keep me sane.
Yeah.
Because we're all stuck at home. I also worked a lot. I was fortunate to work for, at that time, Skylum Software, which is another photography software company. And we started doing daily live streams. So me and my counterpart, between the two of us, we were live streaming sometimes up to 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And just keeping people involved, building a community, and it really got me to dive headfirst into live streaming, which I wasn't terribly comfortable with before, but I learned very fast how to do it. Um, and that's really shaped who I am in business and in teaching and in photography today is, I do live streams for the company I work with now 3 times a week, and I teach and I speak. And those experiences really shaped where I've grown into as a professional.
So let's get into the heart and soul of what you do on a daily basis. So what I want to do is put you in front of a bunch of grade schoolers, sixth
Okay.
graders. It's career day, and one of the kids is curious and is like, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer them?
I teach people how to use photography software.
Okay.
So that's kind of like that's the sixth grade answer I would give. And if they wanted to know more, I help people organize their pictures. I help them edit their pictures and I help them make sure they're safe and backed up. So that's kind of the answer I would give a grade schooler. In a nutshell, that's what I do.
So I would imagine somebody that's doing that, especially storage and backup, you've had horror stories with losing hard drives.
I have.
How many times?
Only once, and I was pretty young. I was in my 20s. I was working for a startup.com company, and I was one of those first lucky people who ever got to work from home. I moved from where the company was located to be with my now husband. He was in the Navy at the time, and we needed to be in the same place in order to make our relationship work. So I was able to convince my boss to let me take my laptop and move. And so I was working from home, and it's a very, very, very small company, and I had no backups. So I was running the heart of this little company in my 20s from my home, and nothing was backed up. And I got a virus,
Yeah.
and it wiped, well, it didn't wipe the hard drive, but it corrupted a whole bunch of stuff. And again, we were a very small company, and it cost us at that time $1,500 to have somebody come in and retrieve the data from that hard drive. And luckily, my boss liked me, but I definitely heard a lot about that. It was very formative, and it gave me a really good scare. And so ever since then, I've been very passionate about making sure any important files you have on your computer are safe and backed up. And, earlier in those days, it was a matter of, routinely burning things to a CD or a DVD. Now we have cloud backup and things have dramatically changed and things can be automated and it's much simpler. But there's a lot of misconceptions that people have today because of the cloud. They think their stuff's backed up when it's really not necessarily. And so that's one of the things I work with people to make sure their stuff isn't all just stored in one place, that you have replication, and the cloud is a great place for one of those places. But if you have all your eggs in one basket, if that company or that service were to have, some sort of internet attack or ransomware or something like that, if everything's in one place, you stand to lose it. So that's what I teach people.
There was a guy I used to listen to. His name was Leo Laporte. He was the tech guy. Right? Out
Yeah,
of
he's
Petaluma,
great.
and he used to always say, if you don't, I think carbonite was what he
Mhm.
used to pitch all the time. And he was like, if you don't have things backed up in three places, it's not backed up properly.
Exactly.
And I always remember that because I remember at one point I had just taken my son. He must have been, it was '08. Obama came to town and I went to a rally and took all these pictures and videos. And a few days after that, I used to take a 500 gig hard drive and transport it between work and home. And I remember I used to always wait for the platters to stop spinning.
Mhm.
And for some reason that day, I don't know what happened, but I remember I tilted it and I heard it go zing, and I was like, oh no. And I remember I was going through hardcore things. Like I was doing Google searches like, how can I salvage this? And they were like, if you put it in a freezer, freeze the platters, right? It's kind of like putting your phone in rice if water
Mhm.
happens. It was this whole thing. And I was like, there's no way. I mean, I tried it, but it didn't happen. But anyway, those were in the arduous days because in cloud computing now, it's a lot easier. I mean,
Yes.
just so much easier to access. So let me ask you this. When you were in the sixth grade, what did you want to be? What was your dream life?
I wanted to be a musician.
Okay. So,
I was in band. I played the clarinet. I had been taking piano lessons since I was 7. I loved music. I was in the handbell choir. I don't know if you know what those are, but those are the big bells that you
yeah,
ring. Like,
yeah.
I did all of that kind of stuff, and that was the highlight of my life at that point. And yeah, I actually started out a dual major in college, business and music. I never finished the music degree, but you know, life happens.
Yeah. What was your first concert? What was your favorite concert growing up?
Oh gosh. There's just so many.
Or one that left a really, really deep impression?
You're putting me on the spot here, and I'm trying
Uh,
to think which one was. I don't have a single one coming to
that's
mind
fine.
right now.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So let me go back to the beginnings of your life. Are you originally from San Diego?
No, I'm from the Central Coast of California, so about
Okay.
6 hours north of here.
Okay. So what were these foundational elements early on in your life that made you get into music and business and ultimately photography and helping people with all of those things?
So music is something my parents started me in young. I was interested anytime I'd get near a piano. I was over there as a little one, just, tinking away. So they got me into lessons. And then as I got through school, in fifth grade, they start you in band if you want to start in band. And I got into that. And so music just became a big part of, my adolescence. Business, my parents ran their own business for over 45 years. So running a company and being an entrepreneur is something that is very deeply ingrained in me. And my grandfather before my dad also ran his own business. So this is something that's been inside me. So when it came time to go to college, for me, it felt like, business is the easy choice. Like, I know this, I can do this. So that's the direction I went. Where photography came into the mix was, um, I'd always liked taking pictures. I've had cameras ever since I was a little one. But during the film days, when you're young and you're a kid and all you have is your allowance, processing film, you can't get a lot done with that, right? Like it's expensive.
Yeah.
And so once I got my first digital camera, this whole world opened up. And it was like, wow, I can take all these pictures. I just need to have a hard drive to save them on. And I was able to take pictures and pictures and pictures. And then I started learning Photoshop and different photo editing and playing with them and making them into different fantastical things just for fun. And fast forward a few years, my husband bought me my first DSLR. And so this was right before we moved to Italy. So my husband was active duty Navy. We lived 4 years in Sicily.
Wow.
And so I got my DSLR right before we moved. And while I was in Italy, I actually learned how to use my camera. Like I learned what aperture was and ISO and shutter speed. I joined a camera club. I hung out with other people who were into photography and that's what they were passionate about. And I just grew. And by the time we came back, I was like, well, I'm a photographer now. And I hung up my little shingle and I did some portrait shoots. But where I really found my passion was in helping other photographers learn how to use the software. So, over this entire time, I was writing a photo blog, sharing my travels, sharing photos. I eventually morphed that into more tutorials and gear reviews. I still share my travels and those adventures, but it's just shifted hugely over the years. And that's where I've gone with my photography. It's also worth mentioning my mom's also an avid photographer.
Okay.
So we share that in common and we actually have almost all this exact same sets of gear. Like, we keep each other on our toes.
I had a Pentax K1000 when I was younger, and I went to Italy a few times. I went to I had a pen pal in high school and went out and visited her family. It was south of Florence, and I went to Rome, and then I went back to Venice and the poor man's Riviera and Cinque Terre and all of that. And I think I had 35 rolls, and I that was my only shot, you know. And it was pre-digital, and I wish I could have had digital. But the coolest thing I did at one point is I went to a Frida Kahlo exhibit, and
Mm.
halfway through, and I'm taking pictures, somebody frantically runs after me. No, 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 you can't take pictures of this.
Oh.
And I was like, well, I didn't have any idea. Well, what I had done is I was towards I think the latter part of the trip, I had accidentally grabbed a roll of film that was already developed, that I already taken, and had a little leader on it. So I put it back
Oh.
in. So all of the Frida Kahlo paintings were over these unbelievable, like, visages of the ocean and fishermen fishing. I could have never done it on purpose. They were the coolest, like,
Wow.
double exposed things. It was so cool. So,
That's awesome. I
I,
would love to see those. That sounds fantastic.
yeah, I'll have to put them together on a page, but it was the best happy accident that I had ever had in photography. What do you ultimately like to take pictures of? If you had your druthers and you could go anywhere and take pictures, what would you take pictures of?
I love doing travel photography. So taking my camera, exploring someplace new, and whether that's taking in the grand vistas of a, landscape, a countryside, or the little tiny details of a village. I love walking around Europe. I love walking around cities and just capturing life and details. And that's where I have the most fun.
So, have you had any like heroes in photography or art that have inspired you to do your work in a different way or the way that you go about photography?
Yeah, there's been a lot of more modern photographers that I've followed over the years that I've learned from. Probably one that you've heard of, Scott Kelby,
Yeah.
right? He's a great instructor. I've gone to, way back in the day, I went to Photoshop World when that was still an in-person kind of thing and took all the classes. And I loved his travel photography and some of the tips that he would give about traveling different places. If you like to capture, say, spiral staircases, go on a website. At that time, it was like 500px. I don't even know if that's still around anymore, but like Flickr, things like this, search for spiral staircases and find those locations in the places you want to visit.
Yeah.
And that gives you ideas of where to go shoot
Yeah.
and things like that. So there were those kinds of photographers that I learned a lot from, the more modern photographers. Looking back in history, I mean, I love anything to do with like Henry Cartier-Bresson, Dorothea Lange, Diane Arbus. All those are all fascinating people with fascinating work, and you can learn so much looking at those earlier photos.
So if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now, whether a photographer, a creative, anybody that's alive that might help you on your journey, you could ask him some questions and just meet him. Who would that be?
Oh, maybe like Leonardo da Vinci.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Because he was so multifaceted, absolutely brilliant, and creative but technical.
Yeah. I
I
remember
think that would be.
he was amazing, and I remember going up into Italy and seeing some of the things that he was a part of
Mhm.
and designs that he was a part of. And I remember my uncle Rico from New York, all he wanted was a bust of Da Vinci, and I remember bringing it back to him, and
Oh,
it
that's
was
awesome.
marbleized, and it was awesome. He totally loved it. So let me ask you this: at the end of the day, how do you balance all of this out? How do you balance the work that you do, educating, helping people, because there's a lot that goes into that, and then taking care of yourself, taking pictures on your own, doing what you want? How do you balance? What motivates you every day to wake up to do this work?
Oh, that's a big question. So it's, some days balance is easier had than others. Um, I work full-time job for a photography software company, so that's where I do the bulk of the educating I do. I also have some freelance work I do with some other companies, and I maintain my own photography business on the side. It's just, my little side hustle, and it is tough to keep everything all in balance. I try to set reasonable goals and expectations for myself and also be gracious with myself to, if I don't meet my own self-imposed deadlines for my personal blog, that's okay. Life happens and we have to be okay with that. So I'm very much a perfectionist by nature, and I have to very consciously not let myself get stuck in that. I also try to take time to get outside. I have an e-bike that I love to ride. I do that a lot on the weekends. And when I do get out to travel, even if it's for business, I try to take a little pocket of time to take my camera, go walk around, go shoot, go explore wherever I'm at. So, uh, or I would say last month, because it is the 1st of April now. I did a little bit of travel for work. I was in Salt Lake City for a conference. The day the conference ended, it ended at 3 in the afternoon. I took my camera and I went and walked around Salt Lake City downtown. So that was a real treat. And I was able to take some pictures, just decompress and do some of what I love, which is just exploring a new city.
Yeah.
I also went to another conference in Las Vegas. On my way back, I stopped at a couple of really cool places. The first one is called Seven Magic Mountains. It's an art exhibit out in the desert. It's these huge painted boulders stacked up. Just kind of neat to stop and look at. So I stopped and checked that out because I'd seen the sign many times, but I'd never paused. And then a little further down the road, a couple hours down the road, I had passed many times this abandoned water park. And I love abandoned places
Yeah.
and the stories that they tell and the textures. And, I was traveling alone. So I was like, okay, I have to do this smart, stopping at an abandoned water park in the middle of the desert by myself. So my thought was I was going to pull in. If there was anybody sketchy around, I was just going to keep driving. I got there. There was one other car. I was like, okay, nobody else around. Cool. Grabbed my camera, got out, started walking, and I see a few people up on the hill. Get a little closer. I realized it's a mom and her two kids and their dog. I was like, this place is totally easy. Like, and I was able at that point to just kind of walk around and thoroughly enjoy myself. Um, and that was one of those cool, refreshing, creative breaks for me, just to be able to be like, all right, this is a relatively
Yeah.
safe environment. Like, obviously, I don't want to go step in a hole, watch where I step kind of thing. But
Yeah.
and it wasn't gated or I didn't have to go crawl through fences or anything crazy. It was just like the neatest place to explore. And it's this
Cool.
old water park that is just being reclaimed by the desert.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. There's a photographer in Kansas City that goes to different places that are vacant now, and we'll take pictures of them, like malls and just
Yeah.
outdoor like things that just don't exist, like outdoor theaters. There's just all these different places. It's fascinating how nature
Yeah.
does its work on it and how you can really reclaim it with photography.
Exactly. And it's like the way I captured it today, in 6 months, it's going to look different.
Yep.
And this place is completely covered with graffiti at this point. So there's very little of the original that is still there, other than some of the structures. A lot of them are burned down.
Yeah.
Most of the slides have been dismantled. There's a few slides left. And I've talked to people who went there, you know, 5, 6 years ago, and they're like, oh my gosh, it's so dramatically different now than it was then.
Yeah.
So this is some place that I can see myself stopping every time I'm driving through to Las Vegas. I'm like, I'm going to pull off and see what it looks like
Yeah.
today.
For sure. So let me ask you this. If you were to walk into a room with all the clients that you've helped throughout all of the years, and you could go up to a podium and tell them one fun thing about you, one fun story, one fun anecdote, something that they may not know that would humanize you a little more to them, what fun story would you tell them?
Oh, that is an interesting question. So one thing about my clients, I've been very fortunate that most of them have become personal friends.
Okay.
So they know me pretty well.
Yeah.
Um, some of them might be interested to know that, I really love good wine,
Yeah.
or that I'm a bit more of a foodie than they might have realized, that kind of thing. Um, they all have heard the anecdotes about my cats. That, I'm pretty much an open book when it comes to that kind of stuff. So because I've been fortunate to work with people who also become friends, they do know a bit about me like that. And
Sure.
that's one of the things that I try to do in my business is I talk to people like they're my friend. I treat them like we're friends sitting across the table having coffee with each other. And I try to break down complex and technical things, make it easy to understand and accessible for everybody. And really, I don't want to shame anybody because they don't understand this bit of technology or that. It's just trying to be helpful.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, of everything that you've done and accomplished and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Oh, interesting question.
Hmm.
I like looking back on my body of photography work
Yeah.
because there's days when I can look at it, I think about it and go, oh, every creative has those days where I go, oh gosh, I'm a crap photographer. I'm crap at this. But then I can go back and look at my work and be like, you know what? I have been at some cool places. I've seen some really neat things. I've met very interesting people, and that I'm really proud of.
So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that you work with, but you ultimately run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, well, I mean, I want people to see me as, confident thought leader, things like that. I think what they probably don't see is that I'm questioning myself and, sometimes I'm not sure of things just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Um, but I like for people to perceive me as being confident and knowledgeable, but I stumble and I question just like everybody else.
What's your favorite manual camera? What's your favorite digital camera?
Ooh, okay. So manual camera, my favorite would probably have to be one that I have sitting up on the shelf behind me, which you can't see because the green screen is there.
Yeah.
But I have an Olympus 35. It was
Okay.
my grandfather's that he bought in Japan during World War II.
Wow.
It's still in pristine condition. It still works. Um, and it's sitting displayed on my shelf. So that's probably my favorite manual camera. The thing is beautiful and it is really cool to take pictures with. So just
Yeah.
a tiny, like it's a little 35 millimeter awesome camera, built
Wow.
like a tank.
Yeah.
My favorite digital camera, so currently I shoot with a Canon R6,
Okay.
which is a full frame mirrorless camera, and it's the best camera I've ever owned. Recently, I also had the pleasure of testing out a Fujifilm GFX 100S2,
Wow.
which is a medium format camera. And that thing was epic.
Wow.
I really had a lot of fun with that. It's 102 megapixels, so the pictures it takes are massive. The hard
Wow.
drive space it fills up is incredible.
Yeah.
So that thing was really cool to work with. I would say, I love my Canon gear, but I've also had a lot of fun working with some Fujifilm gear as well. So those would probably be up in the kind of tied right now.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to hire you, they want to check out your work, your body of work, any of the good business, where do they go?
They can go to angelaandrew.com. So that's ANGELAANDRIEUX.com. Up at the top of the page, there are links to my socials for Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all of that. And I would love to see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Angela, this has been great. Thank you so much for your story. Thank you for your time. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much, Joe. It's been a pleasure.
It's been great. Thank you. Hello, friends. Joe Dimino here. I just wanted to let you know that after 30 years or so, I have finally released my first book of poetry through the mighty Spartan Press here in Kansas City, Missouri. As the creator and host of both Neon Jazz Radio and the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino podcast, along with being a visual artist, I'm ready to embark on a new adventure and want you to be a part of it. You can get a copy online via Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and actually on the streets in Kansas City at the great Prospero's bookstore off 39th Street. You can also visit joedimino.com for links to the book, to more poetry, and everything in my world, including paintings. Thanks for all of the love and support over the years, and please dig the words.